All right, traders, we're back. Check this out. Canadian Japanese yen here under the microscope, and I'm pretty excited actually. We just decided to pull the trigger on this one, and you're probably familiar with the Canadian Japanese yen, right? We talked about the situation here last week. I was presenting you the case for the first time, and I was telling you about this potential bearish opportunity, mainly because of a very specific trading technique. If you remember, let me refresh your memory. We talked about the midway snatch gap, right? The midway snatch gap, that gap that occurs right at the middle of a move, right? And then price comes back just to close that gap and then start to turn back down. That's usually a strong indication that this move closing that gap, that came all the way just to close that gap, was a technical correction to the previous move which consisted that gap, right? So we think this is the tipping point, and since we already have a larger key level system that kind of engulfs the price action, let me show you where it's coming from. It's coming from the monthly chart, believe it or not. So we already have a rooted, strong, solid, key level at 81.26. We feel that price, if turning around, is gonna get there. It's gonna head straight to that 81.26 level. All right. So, which is why now as we've pulled the trigger just recently. We're aiming at 81.26. That's where we're placing our price target. Now, we felt that it's a good time to pull the trigger because obviously we got that gap, right? That gap is kind of an invisible force of resistance. Just think about it that way. Obviously, when you look at price, you look at the chart, you don't see any resistance here. There are no levels, right? Which is why I said it's invisible, right? It's the gap that's being pressing, that gap area is being pressing from above, creating that invisible resistance. So obviously we're playing out that invisible resistance somewhere around, the levels of 83.20, 83.10, right? And our stop loss level represents that, right? Just some distance from that area, 83.80. That's where we place our stop loss level. Now, I'm telling you this because we expect price to keep pushing downwards, right? I mean, today and in the next few days, we expect price to actually begin to turn around, right? And if we're not going to have that, if price is going to pull back up again and begin to challenge that invisible resistance we have here, right, taking the previous local highs we had yesterday and a few days before, then of course we will consider to close the position and pull out. All right, it's only about that gap area that's gonna play out as a resistance, gonna hold, and price will begin to turn back down, right, and begin to build up that downside move we expect to have. All right, so we're aiming at 81.26. That's about 150 pip. We got our stop loss level at about 100 pip at 83.80, and it sure is going to be interesting to come back and see how things have played out. We'll do that, right? We'll definitely do that. All right, guys. So there you go. Canadian Japanese yen. We're pulling the trigger, establishing a new short position. That's about that for today. Enjoy the rest of the day, and we'll be back tomorrow.